The Garbage World by Charles Platt is like a complete stereotype of old school pulp sci-fi novel. Yeah, I think it actually manages somehow to stereotype itself. Um, Anyone my age, plus maybe 10 years, plus minus 20, 30 years, will all be familiar with those stereotypes, which we fought so hard against. Sci-fi is badly written. It's aimed at a readership of teenage boys who are immature. It is lurid and unbelievable. It is all these terrible things. And like many of us, I fought against those stereotypes. I fought hard for my sci-fi kudos. I think as a teenager, I didn't know a single other person who ever admitted to having read sci-fi except my parents. It was hard back before the internet linked us up with other like-minded people. I feel like if I had encountered Charles Platt's writing, The Garbage World in specific, before I had read the lights of Theodore Sturgeon, Robert Heinlein, Asimov, Ursula Le Guin, if I had have encountered this first, not only would I not have been defending science fiction, I would have been out there with the naysayers talking about what crap it was, what garbage it was, if you will. This book wallows in every single one of those stereotypes to the point where, if you finish it, as I did, you might be rather awed at how indecently stereotypical it is. Now, this is not a case of it is so bad it's good. No, it's just bad. It's really bad. But my mystifications succumb to disbelief by the end, and it is a perfect example of something. And many people seem to have liked it. They've talked about the deeper meanings or the implications or whatever. I'm inclined to say to all that, bollocks. It's just a really, really bad book that comes from a specific era, which it demonstrates rather well. I don't think it has any deeper meaning. I think the author, let's see, he was born in, 47, I think. And this was first published, allegedly, in the 60s as serial and then turned into an actual novel in 67. So the author would have still been quite young, but not as young as the writing indicates. So the more official reviewers, you know, the kind that get paid by periodicals and stuff for their reviews, they often jovially, very jovial, refer to it as scatological satire. I can only assume that they did not actually read it, or maybe they read it and could not get their head around it, and I really can't blame them for that. But scatological implies excrement, and there's no excrement at all, though the author does the best he can with garbage in all its manifestations of slushy to solid to mud or whatever to get that excrement type feeling. Satire, the meaning of, as I understand it, is the use of humour, irony, exaggeration or ridicule in order to expose and criticise people's stupidity or vices, political parties, in order to make a commentary about something. So I really don't see how this can be satire, because it doesn't seem to actually target anything observable to be mocking. Perhaps it is. Perhaps in the 60s there was some movement that I'm wholly unaware of that this is targeting and trying to satirize. I read a lot of 60s stuff. I rather doubt it, but maybe. And if so, and you know what it is, by all means tell me. So I don't think it's satire since it isn't targeting anything. It does try for humour. It's very painful, wince-worthy humour, but yeah, it's humour of a kind. And it certainly is well up on the exaggeration. It does exaggeration. It does more exaggeration in a 3-syllable word than some people can manage in a book. And in actual fact, it mostly feels like it was written by a teenager for teens or children. So, you know, the nasty little boys of all genders, I'm not pointing fingers here at a gender, but nasty little boys of about 10 to 14 who like to snigger over words like poo and dirty. That is basically what this book feels like. It feels like one large 10 to 14-year-old snigger. And it's embarrassing to read as an adult. I mean, I'm sure there's 14-year-olds out there who in the 60s would have absolutely adored it. I keep thinking of Terry Pratchett. He wrote a book where there was actually a book about poo, and he satirizes very adequately the fact that children are fascinated by poo and dirt. And someone wrote a whole book about it and has made a career about appealing to 10-year books to children who are about 10 who think that's really, really exciting. That's satire. This, not so much. So what the actual story is, the story takes place on an asteroid called Copra, with a K. And that will delight any of us who, as children, memorized the word coprolite and then sniggered together over how smart we were in our prehistoric pretensions and how we could say poo without anyone knowing. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. This asteroid, Copra, is within a belt of many other asteroids. All the others are luxury asteroids who carry clean people and a luxury style of life. And it has become the dumping ground for all the waste of all the luxury satellites. Now that could have been a good thing. And there's a little bit of backstory as to how that happened. That could also have been a good theme. It could have been interesting. It could have been insightful, especially to the modern world. It could have been meaningful, but it manages to avoid any of those pretensions of actual novel writing. Anyway, so this is the dumping ground of all their waste. The people who live on it live by scavenging from the waste, so everything they eat is garbage that's been thrown away by the clean asteroids. Everyone who's... I've got to mention water. Apparently it doesn't rain on Copra. All you get is the fluid garbage that falls from the sky. Sure, whatever. Anyway, our story starts when a spaceship carrying 2 officials from the rest of the asteroid belt arrives. One is a minister and is the stereotypical bad guy from the first time he opens his mouth. The other is his assistant, stereotypical, our hero who goes over to the enemy because the enemy aren't really the enemy guy. Whatever. They are there to evacuate the asteroid, while a new generator is installed. So these asteroids have generators which create the gravitational force that's required. This one, I think it actually mentions the gravitational force. I think it might be 1/3 Earth gravitation. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, so the artificial gravitation is generated by a machine that is failing because the garbage on Copra has gotten so deep that it can no longer cope. So the 100 or so residents of the village will be evacuated while this happens and then return to their homes after. Minister and assistant contact the village, which is made of garbage, snigger, and inhabited by everyone who survives on scavenging garbage, snigger, snigger. Everyone is disgustingly dirty, snigger, snigger, yuck, yuck. The headman of the village is called Isaac Gaylord, which I admit that will never not be funny in the 2000s in a way that I suspect wouldn't have registered to someone in the 60s. But anyway, that gave me some element of joy for a while. So really obviously really early on, the bad guy, I think his name's Larkin and the other one's called Lurpin or something. Do I care? Do I care enough to read the back of the book? They're not on the back of the book. Okay, I'm going to assume that the minister bad guy is called Larkin because that seems to ring true. So he's obviously got some other nefarious plot, because it has to be nefarious, right, in this kind of a book, which is uncovered by his assistant. The assistant is victimized by the bad guy minister and is sent off to the rest of the world to find all the scavengers who are nomads and not living in the village before they're evacuated. Whatever. Okay, the plot essentially exceeds the stereotypical and goes straight into the nonsensical. The meandering around the world, that could be a plot element in a more adequately narrated story whereby you can discover the world itself. I feel like the author is clearly very proud of this world he's created, and there's notions there that could work. They're throwing all the garbage until it becomes its own ecosystem. Yep. Radioactive garbage dumped so that you've got mutations of plants and animals. Sure, that could work. It doesn't work here, though, because it's very, very poorly written. The plot element is so rudimentary that at times my brain just sort of glanced off it. It's like, you can't develop a plot when you've got something so basic that you're not actually telling a story, which is pretty much what you get here. Okay, the dialogue is abysmally bad. Abysmally bad. This is something that feels like it was written by a 13-year-old for his mates to read under the desk at school, and was never given to anyone to correct. There's various misunderstandings and misuses of gravity or physics. I suspect, I'm not a physicist. A few things in here do not ring true. Do I care enough to go online and investigate whether they're right or not? 2 guesses. You'll only need one. There's an ending. What can I say? It is travesty level bad. A lot of people have liked it. If you love pulp sci-fi of its era, it's got many good points. It's almost classically pulp. It is... no. So while I was reading it for a while, I was making notes about things that I felt needed notation. Eventually I gave up because there was just too many of them. You can't make notes about how poorly something works when it's happening 2 or 3 times a page. But on page 90, I wrote, there's a point where our main character, whatever his name is, what is his name? Lucien, that's it, falls into a crevasse of garbage after a garbage shake, and he can't get out. And they eventually get him out. Oh, the dialogue. Oh, that dialogue. So bad. They eventually get him out by taking roots of these mutated plants and tying them up and sending them down, and he ties them around himself. And all I could think is, whoever wrote this, at this stage of their life, they had never actually encountered a plant root, and they had certainly never tried to tie a knot in it. They may have grown up reading variations of a Swiss Family Robinson or something, but that's not how plant roots work. And trust me, I have tried. So there's that. What else? There's just so much. Oh yes. From the beginning, and especially in the beginning, the author revels in telling us how everyone is smeared in garbage and their clothes are dirty and torn and their hair is matted and full of mud and it's all garbage, 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 and the whole planet smells. I feel sympathy for that. In my volunteer role with Ocean Crusaders, I've had cause to visit some of the major municipal dumps. They are foul and they are feral. And I don't need to imagine what this garbage smells like. I've smelt it in summer in Queensland. If there's a point he's trying to make, he isn't making it adequately. If he wants to go snigger, snigger, yuck, yuck with his 14-year-old friends in the corner, does fine. Oh yes, of course there's a girl with sex, love, interest, value. And they end up having sex in a pool of garbage mud, which I suppose, yuck, yuck, snigger, snigger if you're about 13. It's gross, but he's obviously trying to be gross the whole way through. He's trying so hard to be gross, it's wince-worthy, but not gross. Just a bit pathetic. I kept thinking sepsis. Apparently the great-grandfather or the grandfather of the current gay lord, that's never not going to be funny, settled the planet trying to make it into a luxury planet, and the 100-odd people who live there now are remnants of them. I don't think you mutate fast enough in 2 or 3 generations to deal without water and to have that much resistance to sepsis, but you know, that's applying logic, common sense and adulthood to a book that is lacking in any of these factors. Okay, you're either going to like this sort of thing or you're not. For its pulp value, it's something. However, the actual book, I think, is quite nice and quite interesting in a few ways. This is a Panther edition. And Panther Science Fiction, or Panther Press, are actually an interesting little niche publishing company. They started as mass market paperbacks. They then specialized at some point in reprinting hardcovers in paperback or reprinting from America to England, as I understand it. And then they vanished. Now, all of that's noteworthy because this was published in 1968. So it's an era when the cover art isn't often described. Now you can see that my cover's been read once or twice and it's a little bit faded at the edges, a little bit oxidized on the pages, but still in pretty good condition. What's noteworthy about it to me is that ridiculous cover. It looks like someone crumpled up a bunch of roses with the ribbons and then took a shot of it. You can see a rose here and another one there, maybe. Or maybe they just crumpled up a whole lot of paper, took a photo of it with a filter, and then shoved it on the cover. It's a poor cover. Panther can be very hit or miss. Some of their covers are seriously missed. Every now and then they get a good one. But unusually for its era, at the back it says cover by Ferp. Ferpef. F-E-R-E-F. And in that era, they didn't often credit the cover art, but having credited it, I can't find anything more about it. I can't find out who this Ferpef is or was it a person? Was it a conglomerate? Don't know. So I find the actual paperback quite interesting, and I think I'm going to hang on to it. Now, the original American paperback, I can't remember who that was published by, is actually a really beautiful, gorgeous piece of artwork. It's got a yellow background. You can see a structure that's obviously seriously Garbage World, and there's a little fly in the front. Love that artwork. But I actually think that this rather minimalistic, rather uninspired artwork more suits the novel inside. Another thing is, I got it for the title, Garbage World. I thought that was interesting. I thought it was topical for things that are happening in the world today. I wouldn't have got it without that title, and I believe that Charles Platt originally wanted a different title. Would it have been better? I wouldn't have read it. Who knows? But Charles Platt himself sounds quite interesting. He wrote a couple of other books a bit later on, one of which I think was called The Gas, and got banned in the UK because it had sex in it, and that wasn't allowed back in the day. So I'm guessing that when this was published, even before The Gas, having two people having sex in a pool of garbage mud would have been very risque. These days it's very wince, but in the day, maybe it meant something. He wrote about a dozen science fiction novels. He wrote slightly fewer than that stories, I believe, but he also wrote non-fiction. It sounds like he is an interesting man who has lived a very interesting life, who's involved in several aspects, cryogenics at one stage. So he sounds really interesting, and he at one stage printed 3 books that were basically interviews with science fiction and fantasy authors of the day. Can't remember their name off the top of my head. One or more were nominated for Dreammakers. That's it. Dreammakers 2 and Dreammakers 3. At least one of them was nominated for Hugo, and I suspect that those would be very good. I also suspect that Charles Platt was very much one of the in-group, and it could well be that he was nominated for this Hugo because he was in-group, because having read a little bit of science fiction, I think there was a thing that happened. If you were one of the crowd, you might get nominated for things that you might not otherwise have got. Anyway, if I ever get the chance, I will try his Dreammaker books, which sound good. If I'm ever feeling very, very masochistic, I might try The Gas or The Silicon Man, which he's better known for. I would strongly advise that The Garbage World is a very, very niche book. I do not think it is a good book. Some people do. I'm mystified by the people who think this is a good book and full of social commentary. I'm as mystified by them as I am by the actual book. Anyway, if you're one of those very, very niche, I suspect, science fiction readers who have read this, I'm interested to hear what you think about it.